I was raised in Clarkston, Washington. My granddad farmed on Antone at Montgomery Ridge, and I always spent the summers with him, and I always desired to be a farmer. So I went to college, and I didn't have the money to farm. It took too much money to farm. So I went to college, and I was going to be an engineer, and then NASA laid off, and there's no jobs in engineering. So I eventually went into nursing. I became an RN, and I worked at St. Joe's Hospital in Lewiston, Idaho in ICU for 27 years. And I built up money to start buying farm ground, little pieces at a time, farm and ranch ground. And eventually I developed enough money and had enough lucky breaks that I was able to buy sizable pieces of ground to where I could support myself farming and ranching. I'm Ron Scheibe. I'm from Antone, Washington. That's in the very tip of southeastern Washington, up against Oregon and Idaho. And I'm a wheat farmer, a small grain farmer, and I raise cows and I do custom farming applications. So we're on a plateau, and we have creek drainage. We have some riparian growth along the creeks. We're farm ground and range ground in between the creeks and the drainages. There isn't very much foliar growth besides along the riparian areas. It's about 10-15 miles to the Blue Mountains where there is forest growth. In the summertime, temperatures will get up in the hundreds, 110. Usually, some summers we don't get up too much above the hundreds. Last year was a real hot summer, and it really was detrimental to everything. So restoring riparian areas has a good impact on wildlife. The deer use it a lot, the birds use it a lot of your non-hunting wildlife uses it. It increases your diversity in the riparian areas. Also, any trees that are planted, I've planted a lot of windbreaks and a lot of wildlife coverage, and it changes your wildlife too. It moves the wildlife in, and it really increases the diversity, not necessarily the hunting diversity, but the diversity of what your wildlife is. So having a riparian zone, a functioning riparian zone, I feel is environmentally friendly and the right thing to do. I think it's ethically right. As far as financially helping out the farm, without the CREP program and other like programs that pay you a little bit of rental rate and maintenance on it, it would not be economically a plus to your farm. But with those payments, I feel it becomes at least a push, if not a plus to my farm. So the CREP program is a cooperative program between Washington State and the federal government. It's part of the CRP Conservation Reserve Program that goes quite a few steps farther in paying back the landowner for the land usage, and the state pays 50% of the cost. The rental rate is higher than CRP, the term limits are higher, and the cost reimbursement is higher. And it's the agreement between Washington State and the federal government to restore salmon and steelhead habitat. So this creek we're standing on is Mill Creek. It's right outside of Antone, Washington, and it's a smolt habitat. I imagine a few steelhead make it up. It runs into 10 Mile, which is a major, in our area, spawning area for salmon and steelhead, which the 10 Mile then runs into the Snake River. So the habitat's cooled the water, and it's also raised the water level a little bit to where the pools have more flow through them. In the past, lots of this creek would go dry in the summertime, and any of those isolated smolt would end up dead. Last year that happened again, but last year was a real exceptionally dry year. For most parts, the creek stays cooler and flows better since the forest buffer has been established. And that's what I've done. And the reason I just like to grow things and I like to improve things. I like to see how I can change the creek. I mean, I look at some of the creeks and some of the places I've planted the trees, and it's just amazing the change in my lifetime.